Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering. We are jumping right in here as David on most is let out with Noble Hierarch. Matt, I think, is on some type of control list. We'll see. Oh, the source. I remember the days of MTG, the source, in the mana drain. Message boards have been largely supplanted at this point, although there are some good Discord channels for different decks at this point. We've got a Spell Pierce brushing aside that Green Sun Zenith with X equals 2. And now a Ponder is a follow-up for Matt. Spell Pierce. I still think a pretty underrated card. I was pretty hyped about it when it was printed back in Zendikar. It's also, I believe, still 100% of my eldest daughter's Magic the Gathering portfolio. I was sorting bulk one day at home and pulling any cards that were anything, and at the time, a Spell Pierce, I think they were like $2. Anyways, she really liked the card, and I told her that I wasn't going to give it to her because I was sorting cards to make money, and she asked how much I would sell the card for, and then she went and got a bunch of pocket change and bought the card. Gave her a better deal than the retail price, but still, every time I see it reprinted, hurts my soul a little bit. That card, if it wasn't reprinted, I mean, it would be like a $5 card, to be fair. They have repeatedly reprinted that card. Spell Snare, another card that was actually like $5 until a reprint. Teferi coming down. And let's see what he does. Probably just start ticking up. No, he's going to go ahead and set back David a turn. Getting rid of that Noble Hierarch briefly. He has stumbled a bit on mana, so if he doesn't top deck a land, it's kind of an excellent sequence. And Green Sun Zenith, X equals 0. This will sadly mean that this Teferi, not long for this world. A Dryad Arbor. Oh, wow. Wow, getting after it. Force of Will on the second Green Sun Zenith. That one was only going to be for a Dryad Arbor, but Matt really looking to contain David's mana base and keep this Teferi around. Teferi ticks up again. Another Noble Hierarch would be enough to clear Teferi, even with the 0 power creature on board. 2 Exalted triggers, all that would be needed. That we'll see. I mean, Matt is on some type of control list, so he may have more responses. Aether Vial undoes a lot of what he has worked to build here. Instant speed creatures that are uncounterable. Kinda undermines. Whoa. What? Force of Negation pitching Force of Will? And now Gaddock Teague? I am very surprised that we didn't just see a hard cast Force of Negation. What on earth? We've got Snapcaster, Spell Snare. Does he just have one card in hand? And now Standstill. Things are getting spicy here. Standstill in a blue-white shell. We'll see what build this is. Maybe this is going to have Sharknado in it. Could be Dreadstill with Stifle Dreadnought. I am looking forward to seeing. And now Sanctum Prelate coming down. Matt, Force of Negation pitching Force of Will earlier to keep up that Snapcaster for Spell Snare, which was crucial in keeping that Gaddock Teague off the board for that turn, though I'm not totally sure that he was that much of a concern. There's a Snapcaster that could have come down and traded with him. Oh, I guess the Noble Hierarch is going to make that like super difficult to do. So fair enough. Fair enough. Matt playing cautiously, taking into account those possibilities, and really just keeping the board bereft of creatures. Another Standstill, and that's really where that card is dangerous. Standstill is just brutal when they link to other Standstills, similar to Fact or Fiction back in the day. You'd Fact or Fiction into another Fact or Fiction. With Standstill, it just repeatedly, card after card, just like throwing dirt on a grave, burying your opponent. Each of those extra cards trading. And Marie Crew Barrett, 3 casting cost. I mean, she can be bounced for a turn. Matt's got some options. Teferi can draw a card and bounce the Marique, which is great value. I mean, your opponent paying 3 mana and just bouncing it back to their hand is pretty massive tempo loss. But Matthew taking his time. You can also bounce the Snapcaster Mage. It would be nice if he had some removal. I mean, if he has a Swords to Plowshares. Actually, I think Teferi... Yeah, Council's Judgment. Yeah, Teferi has not been ticked up this turn. So, Council's Judgment. Going to go ahead and clear this Marique. I assume David's going to be voting the same. And plus a down to 1. Bouncing the Noble Hierarch, drawing a card. And Matt getting aggressive now, turning that Snapcaster sideways. Just 10 more turns of that, or 9 more turns of that. That's all he needs. David still not drawing. More land. This Aether Vial prompting a fetch. And a Snapcaster Flashback Spell Pierce would be, I think, pretty close to a concession. If I was in David's shoes, I'd probably scoop to that and try and win the next 2. There we go. Spell Pierce, brushing it aside. He's got the Noble Hierarch follow-up, but, I mean, he's so far behind here. I mean, we don't know what's in his hands, but it feels like he's got less than a 10% chance of winning this game. A Standstill again. Absolutely brutal. And we'll see how long this match goes. This does feel like David is eating up time on the clock that could be very useful for him to try and win games 2 and 3. Standstill, sacrifice in response to this Eternal Witness. The Witness getting back a Scrib Ranger. The Pro Blue will kind of hold things down for a while, but it's just remarkable that David hasn't drawn any additional mana here. This is just ridiculous. Matt with 7 lands in play. Tons of lines available to him. He can be casting things and leaving Force of Will mana up, whereas David just struggling just to cast the most basic cards in his deck. A Swords to Plowshares Actually taking out the Eternal Witness. I'm surprised he didn't go after the Noble Hierarch. Maybe he has Snapcaster for the swords. I mean, he certainly will eventually. Teferi, I think of him kind of like a time bomb. I mean, Teferi just keeps ticking up, and every time you fire off that bounce to draw a card, or just to draw a card, period, you don't actually have to bounce anything. It's up to 1. I mean, that just feels devastating. From an old school perspective, that type of card advantage is just crippling. I mean, that is just far too much. A Collector Oof coming in here and really Jace the Mind Sculptor. He brainstorms. We've got a fetch. Plussing Teferi, and now Snapcaster Swords. And that finally will do it. I do think those last minutes were... I mean, it was so unlikely to win. I think 10% would be generous to say. I mean, maybe... Is it less than 5%? I mean, it's so unlikely for David to win there. Even if Matt just draws Pokemon cards for the rest of the game and David's drawing the nuts, it still feels like it'd be pretty tough. So we'll see how games 2 and 3 go, as we're about halfway through the round here. It looks like they're at about the 25-minute mark in real time. Of course, we're playing things at double speed here to keep things interesting for you guys. We can also skip over the sideboarding just like that. Speed things up for you as we've got a Aether Vial getting Force of Will, pitching Force. And a Scrib Ranger. This Pro Blue, not totally irrelevant when you're talking about controlling the board and winning with X1s like Snapcaster. A Brainstorm in response to the Scrib Ranger. And now a Swords to Plowshares, enabling Plains inconspicuously on the battlefield. X equals 1 to grab a Noble and turn this Scrib Sprite into a 2-power attacker. Two damage coming across. And now Ponder. And probably the only criticism of Standstill is it's no good when you're behind. I mean, that's really the main criticism with the card. You know, you want to be drawing more cards when you're a little bit behind, and Standstill simply does not allow that. You know, it would not actually be acceptable to play that against this board most of the time. There's a handful of times where it'd be okay. If you've already got a Swords to Plowshares. And it looks like we've got a True Name Nemesis. And this could be a pretty quick game. True Name along with Giver of Runes. I mean, True Name's going to be able to swing for 4 damage a turn all by himself. Monastery Mentor, a little bit of counterplay. This could race. But a Abrupt Decay being fired off. And Spell Pierce just to make a Monk. And this feels like a losing effort. Spell Pierce being cashed in. Snapcaster for a Ponder. And unless Matt has some type of board sweepers, something like a Supreme Verdict in his list, it would be scooping time. And I think Matt actually correctly scooping there. So if you do have stuff like Supreme Verdict and Terminus in there, maybe it's worth a few more quick draws to see if you can hit that, because you're certainly going to be in pretty good shape after you board wipe. But anything shy of that, I mean, that's just not worth continuing on. So Matt there scooping it up, leaving enough time to have a game 3 that his deck can actually win. Seems like his build's pretty slow. Jace the Mind Sculptor Ultimates would not be a shocking way for that type of deck to win. Just keeping the board completely clear of creatures, ticking up every turn, fate sealing, making sure your opponent's not going to draw anything relevant, and then ultimately using that -12 ultimate. Conveniently, leaving Jace alive most of the time. That is one of the more endearing parts of the card. Jace, not one of those self-sacrificing characters. I mean, when he uses his ultimate, it's usually he's still going to stick around. It's not like he's dying for the cause. And a Aether Vial for most. Getting that Dryad Arbor. Filthy synergy. Nice acceleration. That Dryad Arbor usually pretty terrible in your opening hand, but pretty sick when you can cheat it in with an Aether Vial. Noble Hierarch enabling an attack for 2. And plenty of mana here. Swords taking out the Noble. And pre-combat actually would have been better, saving on some life. Aether Vials at 1 and 2, along with some mana. I mean, this could be over very, very quickly from most, depending on what his reanimation portfolio looks like. Got a Giver of Runes and an end-stepped Fauna Shaman. Pretty bold. I mean, that's a very aggressive line from David. It seems like there's enough time left in the round that he could have actually waited for the untap of the Giver of Runes, but he is going for it. Not wasting any time. Putting in Sanctum Prelate as well. And at this point, he knows the shields are down. When that Fauna Shaman didn't get blasted during the end step, there's not going to be any more spot removal to contend with. It's going to be board wipes at best. And can likely infer from the scoop. Oh, look at this, Pyroclasm. Yeah, alright, I was going to say, you could infer from the scooping earlier that he would not have a Supreme Verdict or Terminus. However, Pyroclasm wouldn't really have been an out there, as it wouldn't have protected, it wouldn't have killed the True Name Nemesis anyways. So Pyroclasm making a lot of sense. And Sanctum Prelate actually being chosen to survive. It was a choice in between Fauna Shaman and the Prelate. And we also have a Leovold adding to the board presence, who is conveniently outside of Pyroclasm range, but not from Council's Judgment, which does not target, so no card to be drawn here. Doesn't target, one of the best ways to actually handle Leovold. 2 more damage coming in. Yeah, the most commonly handled card with Council's Judgment, probably True Name Nemesis. That's really the main reason why people play it. But it is a pretty solid catch-all, albeit at 3 mana and sorcery speed, not without its drawbacks. And these Aether Vials are kind of running wild here. I don't know if you guys noticed, that's a Vial up to 5 on the other side. Are we going to see a Vial go all the way up to 7 and put in an Elishnorn? Four mana. Was that a Shark? Sharknado. Cycled Sharknado. Yeah, cycling the Shark Typhoon, getting an XX blue, so that would have been a 2-2. Attempting some resistance here, and that is simply not enough. As David running over Matt there in game number 3. Pyroclasm just not enough. As Sanctum Prelate is a pretty crippling magic card to play against. It is, Chalice on a stick is not a bad option. That is all for this one, but don't worry, there is a lot more. You can check out our older videos, and we're always putting out new videos from ELD's Time Vault games in Bellingham, Massachusetts. If you want to help the channel, of course, you can like, subscribe, share, tap that notification bell so you can know the next time our new videos come out. Thanks for watching.